Well met by moonlight, dear ones. I am Curiosity, and this is my jamboree, a firelit gathering for explorers of the uncanny, the frightening, and the hard to explain. Tonight, we spin tales of scary camping experiences, faces pressed against the window, and strangers on the porch. So settle in by the crackling fire, lean in close. Take a moment to make sure nothing's lurking behind you, and let's begin. Our first story is from r/Let's Not Meet, written by Waffles Meat. Just be aware this story briefly mentions suicide. This story takes place 5 years ago. At that time I was 14 and had been a Boy Scout since I was 11. Sorry if it feels weird, but I'm trying to remember it and tell it as best as possible. Thank you for your understanding. Anyway, it was on summer holidays, and we were usually in the wild for 2 weeks doing scout stuff. We get to know other scout groups from other parts of the country, and it's generally a super good time to meet new people. This time, we met with 3 other groups to spend 3 weeks together. For the record, I was with the 2 other guys of my group, and we shared the tent together. The days go on, and one of my friends has a crush on a girl. One day, he invited her to our tent in the evening to have some fun playing cards and telling jokes. She agreed. That evening, she snuck up to our tent and came with Mia, a friend of hers. Anyways, we'd had a good time during the night, and a couple of hours later, they both left. During our time at the camp, a good friend of mine, Lisa, had a crush on Mia, who was also into her. It was a happy moment for everyone. The days go on, and Mia gets a little weird and talks alone to people who aren't in the camp. As time goes on, rumors say that Mia tried to kill herself in the forest. A kid saw her trying to do it. After that, they alerted the adults, who said she was going to get picked up by her parents a couple of days later. She was gone for a couple of days, and everything went back to normal. Little did we know that Mia was back in the camp, as other younglings saw her in the forest, saying things in the likes of, "I wanna see Lisa," whilst holding a knife. At that moment, everybody was scared as shit. The adults decided to dress up a big tent, I don't know the English name, and put us all inside while we waited for Mia to show up. Eventually, she showed up, saw us, and ran straight towards us with her knife in her hand. It happened so quickly, but I still remember it. One of the adults managed to tackle her down and make sure that she wouldn't get up by holding her tight, and another adult made sure to pick up her knife, call the police, and her parents. The story is nearly to an end as the police took Mia, followed by her parents, and it was the last time I saw her. Since then, I only heard from her once. I heard she was in a clinic with people there to help her. Lisa is still traumatized by these events. One thing that bothers her is that her real name is 1 letter apart from Mia's real name. People sometimes mispronounce it, and it makes her recall all these events. So Mia, I doubt you'll ever read this. Maybe someone who has lived this will come across this post, but once again, I doubt it. That sounds like a very hard time for everyone involved. Whoever and wherever Lisa and Mia are, I hope they both find a way to get past it and to live their best lives. Our next story is from r/Let's Not Meet, posted by Nereids of Neptune. This story happened about 2 years ago when I was 19, and my foster sister Kira was 16. For the sake of this story, it's important to know that I was female presenting and hadn't come out as trans yet. It was the summer before I was going to college, and I mostly lived with my mum and Kira, except for every other weekend, where I'd stay with my dad. Now, summers where I am can get really hot and humid, so we had a habit of waiting to walk the dogs until 6 or 7 p.m, because that's when it would be cooler. but still light outside. On this particular evening, Mum wasn't going to be home until late, though I don't remember the exact reason why. She likes to stay busy and often participates in choirs, Bible studies, youth group events, classes, and more, so it wasn't uncommon for Kira and I to be left home alone until 8 or 9 p.m. So it was up to me and Kira to walk the dogs by ourselves, unless we wanted our younger dog Samson to throw tantrums due to pent-up energy. Even though we lived in the countryside and could have walked them down our street, Kira and I decided to drive 20 minutes to a park instead. I don't remember why. It could have been anything from being bored walking our roads to not wanting to have to deal with blind curves and hills. Whatever the reason, at around 7:30 p.m, Kira and I harnessed our 2 dogs, packed them up in the car, and drove to the park. Let me quickly explain the layout of the park so that it's easier to understand why we got nervous halfway through our walk. This park isn't very big, but it's popular because of its loop. The entire park is surrounded by a mile-long, looping road with its attractions, like playgrounds, ponds, and a small country hall, spaced about in the inner side of the loop. The outer side is just grass, trees, and one playground at its end. Thus, it's common and expected to pass people walking the loop at least 2 times if you're walking in opposite directions, but not if you're walking in the same direction, obviously. Any cars on this road can only drive in one direction because it's a one-way road. At first, everything about this walk was normal. I parked the car, we clipped our dogs to leashes, and we started on the loop. Every so often we'd stop so I could take pictures of our good boys, particularly of Kira trying to wrangle Samson, who pulls like his life depends on it, and weaves around because he wants to smell everything. It was while I was taking one of these pictures that the first encounter happened. A man, who looked to be in his 40s, walked past us, walking the same direction we were, up towards the playground on the outer side of the loop. He smiled at Kira, nodded, said, "Hello," or "cute dogs," or something like that, and kept walking. I honestly didn't think anything of it. We're in a park at the time of day where it's common to walk around due to the cooler temperature, and people where I am are generally friendly. Smiling and saying hi is pretty normal, no matter who says it. We smiled back, maybe said hi or thanks, depending on what he said, and that was that. Or so we thought. This man passed us again only 10 minutes later, directly across from where we'd seen him previously. Just like he did before, he smiled and said, "Hi." This time Kira and I looked at each other once he was ahead of us, and shared an expression of, "Well, that was weird." Just 10 minutes earlier, he'd passed us walking up towards the playground, and subsequently broke off from the loop, and he'd been walking in the same direction as us. This time, though, he'd cut in front of us, and he did it in a way where we had to stop to avoid running into him. Hell, he nearly touched Kira with how close he was walking. That was already weird in itself. The other weird part was him cutting past us in the opposite direction. The only way he could have done that was if he'd cut across the inside of the loop, since it would have been close to impossible to pass us from the other direction if he decided to walk the opposite way. It came off almost like he wanted to walk by us again. But just like before, Kira and I brushed this weirdness off. This guy could have been enjoying a rambling stroll and doing his own thing for all we knew. Besides, we had 2 reasonably sized dogs. Who'd mess with us? Not even 5 minutes later, this same man passed us again, once again cutting so close that he nearly brushed shoulders with Kira. Again he smiled and said, "Hi," before walking off. This was officially the moment I decided we needed to leave. Sure, it's normal to pass a person at least 2 times walking this loop if you're going in opposite directions, but doing so takes a while. You have to at least get to the parallel spot on the loop from where your paths first intersected to see each other again. Both the time between running into the guy and the location we passed each other didn't match up. Plus, I wasn't really a fan of how he cut across us. The first time he passed us like a normal person walking faster than us would, albeit a little close. The second time he cut in front of us from the opposite direction, instead of walking around us, to the point we had to stop to avoid running into him. This third time, he walked up behind us, then did this weird, directionally slanted walk to cross the street and go in the opposite direction, cutting us off again. So yeah, I told Kira to hustle so we could get to our car and get out, instead of doing a second loop. So that's what we did. When we were almost to our car, we noticed a car creeping along behind us. We pulled to the side and stopped to let it pass, but for a second, it stopped too. We figured he was getting ready to park, so we started walking again. The car started creeping along behind us soon after we did, so we stopped again, and the car stopped with us. This was when Kira got nervous. We hadn't seen the middle-aged guy since the third cutoff, so we figured I'd overthought the whole thing. But here we were, with this tinted windowed car, acting weird as all hell. Was it the same guy back with his car? A different guy? We couldn't tell. Before anything could happen, though, another car idled up to the one next to us, and whoever it was sped up. We got to our car pretty fast after that, and practically picked up the dogs to get them inside of it. We got in and got out of there. My mistake, however, was neglecting my rearview mirror and the well-advised rule to not drive straight home if you're worried a stranger's taken too much interest in you. I was anxious, dumb, and primarily concerned with getting home where we could be safe. Because home is safe, right? Nothing bad is supposed to happen to you there, right? Ah, my naive, false sense of security. I think we got home around 8-something. The sun had finally disappeared behind the horizon, but it wasn't fully dark yet. Just that dusty purple color the sky gets before it finally accepts that it's nighttime. Mum wasn't home yet, so we got the dog some water, locked the doors, ate a late dinner, and chilled in the living room, talking about things that didn't really matter. It was almost 9:30 when the scariest part of this whole ordeal happened. There Kira and I were, sitting on different couches, talking about something or other, when we noticed the ceiling briefly lit up over where Kira was sitting. An important note here is that Kira was sitting on a small couch with her back to a window that faces the front of the house, while I was on a couch on the opposite wall, where I could see a sliver of the front porch. Due to our long, slightly curvy driveway, it's common to see headlights stream through that window, light up the ceiling, fade, then intensify. It means someone's just come home, so when the ceiling above Kira lit up, we thought nothing of it, assuming Mum was finally coming back from wherever she went that night, and we didn't take any notice of the light skipping the final arc of someone pulling all the way up the driveway either. We also didn't pay any mind to how long it was taking Mum to come inside. Mum has a habit of pulling in then checking her phone for God knows how long before coming inside. After a couple of minutes, I noticed the small motion sensor light Mum set up on a table on the porch light up. Again, I could only see a sliver of space based on my position and the curtains. Basically, I could see a smidge of the table and the rails bordering our porch, but not its stairs or anything approaching the door. I wasn't paying much attention either, because I assumed it was my mum. Right after the light went off, we both heard the storm door open, but we didn't hear anyone pressing the code keys of our lock or jiggling the door handle, like Mum usually does. The moment the storm door creaked open, our 2 dogs jumped up and ran to the door, barking like mad. Our golden greyhound mix, Calvin, has a deep, scary bark, which contradicts his adorable appearance. Samson, our dumb goofball son, who is incapable of hurting a fly, but is a big boy, jumps up on his hind legs and scrabbles to find purchase on one of the small windows in a desperate attempt to see who's outside. Immediately, the storm door slammed shut, and we heard heavy footsteps on the cement of our porch. Calvin started going nuts and jumped up on Kira's couch, standing on its back instead of the cushions to look out of the window. Samson ran out of the room and went out the doggy door that leads to the back porch, which has a ramp going down into a fenced-off portion of our yard. I couldn't move. I'd never understood, really, what it meant when people described their limbs turning to lead until that moment. It felt like I didn't have limbs, really. Like moving wasn't an option. If I moved, I might glimpse something or someone through the windows. The person could see me running around the house, freaking out and decide to come after us after all. So I sat there, my mind steadily going blank as my heart sped up and limbs refused to move. In the game of fight, flight, or freeze, I'm the freezer. Kira, on the other hand, is a fighter. She spun around and looked out the window, but couldn't see anything because, besides the motion light on the porch, it was too dark. So naturally she got up, grabbed a stray dog toy which just so happened to be a tug-of-war rope with a ball on one end, and opened the door. I told her, very calmly, to shut the door and stay inside. She ignored me and stepped out onto the porch. She came back inside after not seeing anything, but, to my utter disbelief, she disappeared to the kitchen, came back with a knife, and went outside again. This time, she was gone for a handful of seconds before running back inside and slamming the door shut. Breathless, she told me she went out a bit into the yard and saw the outline of a man by the run-down dog kennel we don't use anymore. When she saw him and froze, he moved. This time, she listened to me when I told her to lock the door. I managed to call Mum, despite my head being empty and my limbs being lead, and she convinced me to get up, make sure all the doors are locked, including the basement, and get the dogs inside. I ended up making Kira go into the fenced-up section to drag Samson back inside, because I couldn't get my legs to move after thinking about doing it myself. Cowardly, I know. After Mum got home and looked around, finding nothing, we called the non-emergency number for the police, not wanting to bother them in case we were overreacting. 2 cops came by and walked around our yard and found nothing. We got the sense they didn't believe us, but instead saw us as 2 overexcited girls with active imaginations. Still, they humoured us. After we told them about the park, they told us if we think anyone might be following us, or if someone's acting a little too creepy, not to drive straight home and to check if anyone's following us. Then they left. To this day, I'm pretty sure the only people who believe someone with malicious intent came to our home in hopes of finding 2 teenage girls is Kira and me, though whether or not it was the guy from the park, we're not sure. But it's too coincidental, isn't it? That the day we have multiple encounters with this guy, who goes out of his way to get close to us, and a car inching along behind us, we also had an almost intruder encounter? Plus, there were too many details that didn't add up to us having overly excited imaginations. We both saw headlights, the motion detector on the porch turning on, the storm door opening and staying open until Samson jumped up to look out the door's window. We heard footsteps. Kira saw someone. And the dogs don't run up to the door like that and bark their heads off if no one's there. I don't know if whoever was at our house was the same guy that ran into us at the park. If it was, I don't know if the reason he cut in front of us as close as he did was to test how our dogs would react to him, and them not caring at all, the first time wagging their tails, convinced him that they weren't a threat. I don't know if he was in the car that inched behind us and stopped when we stopped. I don't know what would have happened if Calvin didn't have a scary, manic bark. or if Samson wasn't tall enough to look out the high windows on the door. What I do know is this: if you're out and about minding your own business, and a stranger is taking a lot of notice of you, following you, frequently running into you or whatever, trust your gut. Don't drive or walk straight home. Meander. Get to a public space or just take your time. Pay attention to your surroundings. You never know who is watching you. For what it's worth, OP, I don't think you were a coward. Sometimes that instinct to freeze can save our lives. You staying quiet while your dogs got agitated probably gave your would-be intruder second thoughts. And dear ones, if you must confront a would-be intruder, I urge you to reach for anything but a knife. Our last story was shared by Bootblister. I was 20, living alone on the ground floor of an apartment building. My living room windows faced the small parking lot for the building, which wasn't gated. I'd stay up late watching TV or playing games almost every night. It was winter when I first moved in, so I'd have the blinds down at night to help keep the cold air out. Summer came, and there was no AC in the apartment, so I'd open the windows and blinds at night for cool air. One night, I'm lying on the couch watching TV when I get the feeling of being watched. I look over at the window, and a man has his hands and face pressed against it, merely 3 feet from where I'm lying, just watching me. I let out a blood-curdling scream, and he doesn't even blink. Terrified, I jumped up, grabbed the phone and screamed that I was calling the cops. He still just stood there, completely motionless and dead-eyed. At that point I yelled that I was getting my neighbor and started walking to the door, and he finally took off. I locked the window and stayed up all night, completely on edge. My boyfriend at the time came over and stayed for a full week. He made sure to leave the blinds open and sat at the edge of the couch closest to the window to make it known I wasn't always alone. The creeper didn't show up again, so eventually I got comfortable thinking it was an isolated incident or some rando wandering around the parking lot to break into cars. Maybe another 3 weeks after that, I got home late from waiting tables and parked in the lot. I get changed, grab a snack, and head to the living room to play games. I start to raise the blinds to open the windows and let in cool air. The creeper is standing right there, with his face pressed against the screen. He was not standing in the parking lot when I pulled in, as I parked right by my window. I can only assume he was waiting around the corner of the building, watching me come home, and timing my movements. This time, I grabbed the phone and immediately called the cops. I was shaking, crying, completely hysterical. The creeper takes off. Cops come and say they'll have someone patrol the block when they can, and my boyfriend immediately comes over. He wants to stay with me until I can get out of there, so I start looking at different apartments. Another 3 to 4 weeks later, I had an apartment lined up, on a high floor, in a doorman building. 'Cause at that point, fuck that. My boyfriend had to go out of town for a few days, so I decided to go stay at a friend's place, 'cause I certainly wasn't going to be there alone. I'm at my friend's place for 2 nights, but wanted to run home and grab a few things I'd forgotten. She goes with me for obvious reasons, and we go in the afternoon, not after dark. We decide to hang out for a bit and play games together, 'cause it's daylight and there's activity around the building. No AC, so I hesitantly raise the blinds to get fresh air. I'm terrified opening them, then laugh to myself, 'cause when I do it, of course, no one's there. I open the actual window to see 2 large holes cut into the screen, right above the latches you push in to lift it. They were definitely not there 2 days ago. My blood ran entirely cold. The creeper knew my boyfriend was gone. He was watching and saw his car was gone. I'd left my car there as my friend picked me up, and we always left a light on in the living room to make the creeper think we were awake. So he saw my car, thought I was home, saw the light on, and proceeded to cut holes in the screen to break in. I have no idea if he actually gained access, but seeing how bold he was terrified me. How long had he been watching me, learning my patterns, and getting gradually more aggressive with every interaction? I still sometimes get a chill when I raise my blinds, and it took a long time getting comfortable living in anything but a high-rise. Thanks for the lifelong PTSD, creeper. Let's not meet again. The sun is rising, and we're all starting to yawn. The jamboree is at an end once more. My thanks to everyone who sent in stories or gave me permission to narrate theirs. Remember, I upload new stories on Mondays and Fridays, so please be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so you don't miss out. If you have any thoughts about the stories I've narrated, why not leave them in the comments below? And don't forget, if you've enjoyed your time by the fireside, to magnetize the like button so it always finds north. If you'd like a story of yours narrated, I have a submission form linked in the description, and I would love to learn more of your curious experiences and unexplained happenings. I will see you soon, dear ones, and until then, may your nights be dark and your dreams just a little curious.